The Mystical Emergence podcast is for mature audiences and entertainment purposes only and should never be used over sound medical advice. In this episode, we head into the forest, the raw forest. And now, here are your hosts, Mystic and the Wizard.
So with us today is Ryan, owner of Raw Forest Foods. Welcome, Ryan.
Hi, very glad to be here. How is everyone?
Great.
Yeah, we're really good. What got you interested in herbs and I guess maybe traditional Chinese medicine?
Herbs started, I guess that would be in the late 90s. You know, I grew up in California in the San Francisco Bay Area, so, these things were just kind of around. As a teenager, I had pretty bad migraine headaches, and I was trying, the kind of conventional pharmaceutical approach, and it really wasn't doing anything. And then I started looking to herbs, and they were working. There was a skull cap and feverfew, I believe, were the first two first two herbs I'd ever really tried. So, from a pretty young age, that's when I was in high school. It was just kind of part of the fabric. So it's early, in thinking about when did I get into herbs? It wasn't something very, like a big profound thing, although, they did help with the migraines and that's important, but it happened at this young age where I'm really appreciative of, because it just kind of has been part of my life for a long time. But then it wasn't until after college that I started to get interested in Chinese medicine. And then it wasn't until really right around the time that I started Raw Forest Foods that I got really interested in traditional Chinese medicine and then classical Chinese medicine, which is what I study now. So it's, when we can talk about the difference there if you want, or we can just talk about traditional Chinese medicine or classical Chinese medicine. It's fine.
Yeah. So can you explain to our audience the difference between Western herbalism and then the traditional versus classic Chinese medicine, and then what made you draw towards one over the other?
With Western herbalism, we don't have a lot of a written tradition around Western herbalism. A lot of it was lost, kind of, I guess, in the 1600s, 1700s in Europe, and then in the U.S. With the kind of witch trials, and it's all really tied into misogyny and patriarchy, the church. So there's not a written tradition there with Western herbalism. So Western herbalism, the way that it's kind of practiced now is, I want to say it's maybe 100, a little bit longer than that, years old, and Western herbalism was really just existing at this short period of time before we started to have, conventional medicine, which, was born out of the herbalism that was happening in the U.S. at the time. The first kind of pharmaceutical that was made was aspirin. It's made from white willow bark. And so you see this kind of co-evolution with Western herbalism and conventional medicine, where we're thinking about herbs and one specific function that they can do. So I can take angiographies because it's a very strong antibacterial, or I can take white willow bark because it's good for pain management and headaches, or I can take echinacea because it's good for my immune system. And that's not bad at all. And, most people that study herbalism and Western herbalism, not so much the herbs, but kind of the traditions of it, the general belief is that, before kind of all of the documentation was destroyed and people were silenced, women, because they traditionally in Western herbalism were the medicine makers and the herbalists and the caregivers, before they were really silenced, that there was kind of a bigger tradition of using plants as formulas together, and not this kind of mechanistic approach to it. And that really contrasts with Chinese medicine, because Chinese medicine is built purely around using formulas with herbs, and same with acupuncture. You're not going to go to the acupuncturist and get one needle placed in. You're not going to get one point needle. You're going to have a lot, so that it's kind of creating this symphony of effects where you have a primary and you have a kind of the support staff for it. You have what's called the envoy, and it's the same if it's in acupuncture, if it's in herbalism. And I think part of why we have more of like a, I don't want to say advanced, but more of a sophisticated tradition of herbalism in China is that there is written documentation. It wasn't destroyed. We have written documentation dating back 3,000 years that people go back and read, and scholars are still studying it. And it's evolved throughout that time, and there hasn't been, except for kind of the Cultural Revolution, there hasn't been a time where it was really went through that same kind of like persecution that Western herbalism did, and it still survived throughout that. It just changed a little bit. But so really big difference. I know I'm long-winded, between kind of the Western medicine approach and the Chinese medicine approach is, in Western medicine, people tend to use a single herb at a time, or maybe a few very similar acting herbs at a time. Or Chinese medicine, you're using formulas, and those herbs, if you're just looking at kind of the base function of them, might seem like they have nothing at all to do with each other. Yeah. And then you asked about the difference between Chinese medicine and traditional Chinese medicine. So there's many different types of Chinese medicine. Like I was saying, we have written documentation dating back 3,000 years. There's many different kind of schools of how you approach treatment and the belief in where disease is originating from. That's all kind of the classical Chinese medicine or classical Chinese medicines, because there's so many different types of them. And then during the Cultural Revolution, while kind of anything not Western and not scientific was really prohibited in China, they also saw this need to kind of treat all of its citizens with healthcare, and they couldn't train a million Western practitioners. So the Chinese government put together this thing called TCM, Traditional Chinese Medicine, which is a little bit of a dumbed-down version of a lot of the different traditions of classical Chinese medicine. So it's really approachable, and practitioners can be trained very quickly, and that people can self-diagnose a bit. So you can walk into a pharmacy, and you can kind of figure out what formula that you need for what you have. And there's, from the classical Chinese medicine community, there's a lot of criticism towards TCM. It's kind of seen as like a bad word, because it's not, it's not the original medicine. Like I was saying, it's a little bit like quote unquote dumbed down. But I think that having medicine that is approachable by people and that people can use, people can get trained with, I don't see what the issue with that is at all. I think it's great. Although my interest is more in classical Chinese medicine. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things about TCM or Chinese medicine is that it supports the body as a whole, and it's like it's like the way that so when people come into my shop and it's like they have a headache, this headache is not the actual problem, that's a symptom of something else. And that's how I try to get them to approach things, where you not being able to fall asleep at night is actually a symptom. It's not the actual problem, because they're coming in and they look for one specific herb. It's like that. It's like a pharmaceutical mentality where if I take one drug, it does this thing. But with herbs, one herb can do 10 different things. But then if the root cause of your insomnia is not something that herb hits, then it's not going to do anything. So, people come in and be like, oh, I've tried every single sleep remedy out there. I'm like, yeah, but you're still just trying valerian, lavender, these specific herbs, when your inability to sleep could be from your adrenals. So I think that's why I always loved Chinese medicine so much, is because it actually looks at your Shen and all the different, too much heat, too much cool, and it's a more whole body approach. It is, yeah. Yeah, and you just summed up in 30 seconds exactly what I was just trying to say in 5 minutes about the kind of the Western approach versus the Eastern or the Chinese medicine approach. That's great, yeah. About sleep, yeah,
that's totally right. From a Western herbalism approach, you're gonna do valerian or kava kava or lavender, or, something like that. That's just very sedating from a Chinese, and that's good. People need to fall asleep, right? From a Chinese medicine approach, one of the more popular formulas that I've used a lot when I was working in a herbal clinic for a few years was Swanzhao Rentong, which has no sedating herbs in it. It's a blood building formula. It's focusing on building blood, which is a yin fluid in the body, and it works exceptionally well and not sedating at all. People fall asleep. You want to take it over a long period of time, not when you're experiencing insomnia, but every single night. It's because it's building blood, the effects will be cumulative, and that really highlights the difference between the two approaches. Where it's if the person does have blood deficiency, and that means yin deficiency, that's going to manifest with sleeplessness and insomnia. So instead of just taking something that's sedating, take something that kind of solves the root problem, like
right.
you're saying.
Exactly.
So take us behind the scenes, Ryan. What's going on as far as the process goes when you bring your herbs together, or how you think, hey, let's work on this? How does that whole process come about? Yeah,
so when I first started with Raw Forest Foods, I was doing the formulas myself, if I can even call them formulas, because I knew so little at the time. And as time went on and I learned more, because Raw Forest Foods was started purely as an accident. I did not have any intention of starting the company.
Wow.
Which was good, because if I were to go into it now, I would say, well, I know so little. I can't do this. I'm not an expert on this, but it started by accident. And so, I was learning about herbalism and herbs and Chinese medicine, and I was kind of putting stuff together, and I was coming up with formulas just by doing research and trying things. And, it wasn't long until I learned enough to realize that I need to start working with someone with a lot of clinical experience to put the formulas together. So in terms of behind the scenes for coming up with products and formulas, it's a really collaborative process between me and the herbalist. He's also he's a acupuncturist. He's been practicing acupuncture for about 15 years. Before that, he taught and practiced Western herbalism. He teaches and practices Chinese medicine, acupuncture, and herbs now. And we work together on developing products and formulas. I come with an idea with some of the herbs that I'd like to see in it, and we work together to make it a true formula in Chinese medicine, but also make something that, so if the condition that is manifesting in them is coming from excess heat, or maybe its origin is cold, so you have to generalize these formulas, because there's only so much education that you can do and expect from the consumer in terms of self-diagnosis. So it's a really fun process, and he loves plants and herbs so much, and I do too. So it's the behind the scenes on formulas is fun, and we're constantly trying all kinds of weird herbs like scorpion or salamander, gecko, and all kinds of fun stuff.
I noticed that a lot of the products that you have formulated are around like estrogen and testosterone. I know that it's like a really big issue in the Western world right now, with especially like males being estrogen dominant, just because there's so many toxins in even the air we breathe that causes a rise of estrogen. And, this causes all kinds of issues in males. Like for me being a female, I know breast cancer is linked to that, all kinds of stuff. So can you speak a little bit about the whole estrogen dominance, like what this can cause in the body, why it's so important to target this? And then even for, I get a lot of males that come into the shop that are really struggling with their testosterone levels. And some of them are young, this shouldn't be an issue right now, but it is.
It's remarkable. Yeah. Teenagers being diagnosed with with extremely low testosterone. So not even just testosterone that is within normal range, like let's say, well, I mean, a teenage male should have, like over 300 nanograms per deciliter, but, in the hundreds, where people just, they're not even developing right physically. And then you also have to think about what effect that has on the developing male, and also throughout our lifespan, where you're not having that experience in life as a sexual being, which is such an important experience to being human, in my opinion. Absolutely. And existing in the world as this human animal that we are. That sexuality is a really big part of that. Seeing yourself as a sexual being, as a sexual player within that, and people that are experiencing low testosterone, that's going to be diminished. So there's a lot of psychological stuff that's coming into play there, and that's not even addressing things like depression that goes hand in hand. Anger goes hand in hand with low testosterone. So a little bit of a side note that is interesting. But yeah, so do you want to talk about like the source of excess estrogen, or like what's causing excess estrogen in the body, or?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been thinking about this question for a long time, but also just since thinking about this podcast. And if you look at the levels of testosterone in men throughout the U.S., you see this real gradual decline that I don't think can be purely explained away through the prevalence of plastics in our environment, because it was really happening before the 1950s when we started seeing plastics. And I think that's interesting. That's maybe a little bit more in the kind of the woo-woo side of things, which I like, but I also like the practical science stuff too. Today our environments are just, like you're saying, with air pollution, our environments are just bombarded with endocrine disruptors, estrogenic compounds, so xenoestrogens that we're taking in from the outside, hormone mimickers, and you couple that with, I think, kind of our mental, emotional, spiritual life, and you also couple that with just like kind of across the board, really poor health, and you kind of set this ideal condition for dysregulation of the endocrine system. So, a really important way that hormones are, or I should say the only way really that 99% of them are being detoxified from the body, released from the body, is through the liver. So we know that fatty liver disease, whether it's cirrhosis or non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, is just, it's epidemic. And I forget what the rates are right now, but it's estimated that, the majority of people, the majority of kids will have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And that means our bodies are not naturally detoxifying. So even if the kind of the environment isn't estrogenic, it's damaging our body's ability to detoxify estrogen. And it's so hard because estrogen isn't a dirty word, just like testosterone isn't a dirty word. But it can kind of get that label when we're thinking about this, because for whatever reason, it is building up in the bodies of men and of women, where we're not seeing testosterone build up so much in the bodies of men and women and causing health problems.
Yeah, because I think even women don't even realize they can be testosterone deficient. I feel like testosterone is like something that's not really talked about too much, because there's some symptoms that women come in. I'm like, yeah, you need like tribulus or something. Like you need something that actually help to boost your testosterone a little bit.
It's true. Yeah.
Your estrogen detox formula that you have, can you talk about that a little bit? Because that was like the first thing that I saw on your site and was like, oh my God, this is like one of the best supplements that I've seen, because the Herbal formula in there. Yeah. And people just don't understand. Like I have it on an end cap because it's like, this is like the majority of the issues for like so much.
Yeah, I mean, that's like, aside from pine pollen, because I love pine pollen, that's, kind of what got me into with raw forest foods and everything. I love the performance estrogen detox so much. It's kind of a little bit of my baby. I love it's really different from the rest of our products too. But it's doing so much, and it's evolved to be so just kind of supportive of the body, and I love that about it. But it's something that really anybody can take, and it's going to be very supportive, really strong antioxidant support, supporting detoxification. If someone doesn't have high estrogen, it's not going to hurt them. It's all around. It's a really good supplement. But in terms of, and this is why I started developing this product originally, in terms of targeting estrogen dominance, estrogen detoxification. There were a lot of things on the market, like maybe like DIM. I've seen people take that, or the calcium D-glucarate. They just take that, but all of these different ingredients are only doing one thing, and then you're still kind of left with the original problem, which is that your body's not able to get rid of the excess hormones, or your body's still producing too many of them. So something like calcium D-glucarate, where is actually kind of getting the cells to release estrogen. Well, if we're only releasing estrogen in our bodies, but we're not supporting any of the pathways that it needs to get out of the body, we're not really accomplishing anything, right? Where you're just kind of like sweeping up the house, and you're just, you never sweep into the dustpan and take it to the trash. You're just, moving it around. You're not going to clean the house, right? So the kind of the origin story of that product is that, people were emailing, people, were contacting us, about low testosterone. When I was hearing time and time again that the issue wasn't so much low testosterone, the issue was high estrogen. People wanting to increase their testosterone only really to kind of normalize the ratio of testosterone to estrogen in their body. And it's like, well, kind of like what you were saying about sleep. It's like, well, let's kind of figure out what's really going on here. And, if the issue isn't low testosterone, let's just deal with the estrogen dominance. And I wanted to refer products to people, and none of them were doing everything. That's probably because of cost. So I put together something that I could recommend people, because I wanted to give people something that would work, that would address all of the different layers that you need to address for detoxification.
Well, in full disclosure, I use Ryan's products, but I found Ryan's products, and he's not a sponsor of the podcast, and I found Ryan's products before on my own research, and also talking with my son, the vegan lineman, because he was getting into herbs, and so we were sharing that knowledge, and that's how I stumbled across your site and your information. And pine pollen, you mentioned that. If you could expand on that a little more, that's been one of the few things that has worked for me. I've talked to Mystic countless times about it. The tinctures, they seem to just, I remember, because you'll take a supplement, you'll go, okay, I hope it's doing what it's doing. Some things, Mystica and I have talked about the niacin and how that really worked. And I was like, it worked a little too well, and so I went off. I mean, it's like instant, but, and a lot of times when her and I are talking about health, and she's right in the sense of, well, you've got to take these, to, long term. See, it's not a quick fix, but I did notice with the pine pollen fairly quickly that I started feeling better and strong. And so that is a big, Mystic's correct. That's a big topic for men and women. And how do you see that on your end? Like, do you still get emails? Do you still get people, finding you and going, oh, this is it? I mean, how is that process on your end as far as getting the information out there?
It's complicated because people do tend to find pine pollen. They do tend to find us because of the phytoandrogens, the male sex hormones, testosterone, that are in pine pollen. That's fine. I'm glad that people are finding us through that. But I think that's really selling pine pollen short. And I think that once you start taking it and experimenting with it, it's pretty obvious that something else is happening there, that it's stronger than that. It's doing something else. So in terms of education, I really try to kind of direct the conversation there, that pine pollen, we're not exactly sure, but it's supporting the body, it's healing the body, it's nurturing the body in this way that maybe we don't completely understand. And that for that reason, I think that the tincture actually makes a better kind of adjunct to the raw pine pollen, whether that's as a powder or capsule or whatever, it doesn't matter. Just because you're getting more of the substance of the pine pollen in its whole form, and then the tincture is really targeting some of these isolated compounds in it. But it's such a foundational thing, and I think part of it is nutrition. I think that there's this kind of primal nutrition that's lacking in our bodies, and I'm not talking about going on a paleo diet or something like that. I'm talking about kind of like trace minerals, essential fatty acids, these things that are missing through agriculture. And it doesn't matter if it's organic agriculture or if it's conventional agriculture. Just as we've been tracking testosterone rates in the U.S. for over 100 years and seeing a decline in that, we've also been tracking kind of the mineral profile of agricultural products. The USDA has, and we've seen a pretty incredible and scary decline in nutrients. And conventional, organic, doesn't matter, over time. And you're taking something from the forest, so totally untouched by industry or agriculture, all of that, and it, by its very nature, it is just so incredibly nutrient dense. The pollen is, we think of seeds as being so nutrient dense. Well, pollen is like a seed, except it's incredibly small, and you can get a lot of it. I think that the number one way that it's working is it's healing with this primal nutrition that maybe we don't fully understand. Then it has adaptogenic compounds, so it's working with the body. Then it has the phytoandrogens. So we're seeing a lot happen with it. And by just focusing on the phytoandrogens, the male sex hormones, the testosterone that's in pine pollen, I think we're really selling it short. So I think I think in terms of education, I think it's really fun jumping off point. But I think the real meat of the matter, what's really interesting, is thinking about, actually, it's not uncommon for us to get emails to talk with people who have doubled their testosterone, right, using our products. They've gone from 300 to 600. They've gone from 350 to 700. And frankly, I don't think there's enough testosterone in pine pollen to account for that, right? So what's happening? The testosterone explanation for pine pollen, I think, is just way too short-sighted. We're getting these clues, right? So not just from the way our bodies feel taking it, but we're getting these clues from people that are sending in test results where it's like, okay, yeah, it's totally obvious something else is happening. That's really interesting, and we should explore it. And I think that's exciting. Not just about pine pollen, because I think it's exciting because it can teach us a lot about our health in general and things like our agricultural systems. I
think that people kind of, again, like they're looking for pine pollen raises testosterone, but they're not really seeing that there's a spiritual essence of this plant. And like you were saying, this is from the forest. So we once were in the forest. So men especially, testosterone levels were at a certain,
Yes, I love it.
Yeah, because men had to have a certain drive to hunt, to go out and do these things all the time. So it's as we become more and more and more developed as a society, we're overdeveloped as a society. We're lazy as shit now, right? So it's everything's so overdeveloped. It's is this a part of evolution where men are no longer even producing these because it's not even necessary? If a man has really, really high testosterone levels, if they're supposed to be out hunting and gathering, but yet they just go to the supermarket to grab meat on the way home, is this a natural evolution process that's happening? And I even get people in the store like, oh, well, I eat a really healthy diet. It's like, well, you think you do. And like you were mentioning, like, oh, even organic food doesn't really have the nutrition it should. It's like our soil is really crap. It's everything is overdone. It's just, you're not, like I tell everyone, like at least take a multi if you're not really going to get into it. Like I personally don't take a multivitamin because I'd rather get things from herbs because again, like I'm very, I focus a lot on what the spirit of that plant is. Like pine pollen is an essence that comes from a pine tree. When you look at the tree, the strength of that tree, like you have to know the essence of what you're taking.
I'm so glad you said that. So that's kind of like, I was hinting at that a little bit about how we started to see this decline in testosterone before we could explain it away through the prevalence of plastics in our environment, right, or the prevalence of pharmaceuticals in our environment. And I do think there is that kind of psychospiritual, emotional element to it that I don't know if it's the root cause. I don't know if it's the result of something else. I don't know if it really matters that much to suss it out that much, but it is happening. And it makes you wonder. It makes you wonder if it, like you're saying, if it's evolutionary because we don't need this anymore. It makes you wonder about what the ramifications of that are. So testosterone is it's so multifaceted. If you look at the symptoms of low testosterone, it's not just the kind of out hunting, out foraging, protecting the family kind of hormone. It's also a very nurturing hormone. When people do have low testosterone, they're detached from their families. They have more issues with anger. They actually have more issues with violence. They have depression. So you're taking away a lot of the experience of the male sex, which is more testosterone driven. Of course, men and women, we both need this harmony of testosterone and estrogen, but you're kind of pulling the rug out from under us. And I do think that there is this spiritual relationship with humans, with men. I'm not sure if it's all humans or if it's just, people who ancestrally were in Europe for a long time, around pine trees for a long time, but there is that kind of spiritual unification that you have with the forest. And I think the pine tree is really emblematic of that. And I think pine pollen is just kind of getting the essence of it. And in Chinese medicine, the pollen is like the pure essence, where, people talk about Jing a lot in Chinese medicine and kind of more popular herbalism and wellness now. Well, like nothing is going to be more Jing than pollen because it contains the entire blueprint for the plant. It is the most concentrated thing. So pine pollen is kind of giving you that experience. And I think that's just kind of speaks to the magic of pine pollen and of the kind of the experience that we're missing in our lives.
Well, we've been talking about pine pollen a lot, but could you touched on something that people reaching out to you. Could you maybe share with us one or two testimonials of people that have really seen some positive results from the products that Raw Forest Foods provides?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I'm thinking about something most recently that someone sent us before and after pictures, and also blood work of starting. The only thing they really added to it was our royal pine pollen tincture, the straight pine pollen tincture, and the before and after pictures were incredible. They kind of went from dad bod to like Brad Pitt in Fight Club bod in a like pretty short amount of time. Their testosterone doubled, and they were just ecstatic. I had a long conversation with this person, and that's like, a big example. There's pictures, there's data, there's all of it. Every day we get emails, and I don't think that, I would know it, except I'm on this side of it, but like, contacting companies and telling them, hey, like, I love this product. And, we get those emails, and it really makes all of the work totally worth it, and it makes it fun that, people do contact us, and they're like, hey, like, this thing's working. Like, I feel better. Like, I don't need coffee in the morning anymore. I'm not getting frustrated with my family anymore. Or, you know, I used to get XYZ illness a few times a year. Now I'm not. And yeah, so there's, you know, a ton of these kind of like small examples of just, you know, a few sentences here and there. And then there are the kind of the big ones that are more of a conversation with people that are exciting.
What are your, like, say, maybe 2 or 3 most popular formulas that you sell?
In terms of formulas, it would be the Estrogen Detox. That's by far, that's our number 3 top selling product. And it's the number 1 formula that sells. And then above that would be the straight pine pollen tincture. So that's the royal pine pollen tincture, and then the raw pine pollen. So number 1 formula is the Estrogen Detox. But aside from that, the rest of them are all pretty equally popular with people, whether it's, you know, the more mushroom focused one, the 12 rivers. Taproot is very popular. That's our Jing formula. So they're all kind of, that's a boring answer, I guess. They're all kind of equally popular, except for Estrogen Detox, which is just like leagues ahead of everything else.
I can see why.
Incredibly popular.
Give the specific name of the estrogen product. Is that it?
Yeah, it's Peak Performance Estrogen Detox. So when I first started this product, I just called it Estrogen Detox, and right now we're on our 4th formula of it, and every time we're able to just kind of add some more things to it and keep the price where it is, but you know, we've had to go from 3 capsules to 4 capsules because there's so many more things in it, and not in a bad way, just in like this really like nutritive supporting way of the body. So now it's called Peak Performance Estrogen Detox because it's just so much more than it was before, and that's available just in capsule form. And that's kind of the nature of it being a nutraceutical more than it being an herb.
I just wanted to clarify that for people so that they're listening. They go, "Oh, what's the name of the product?" So that we know what to look.
Yeah,
and you mentioned,
definitely. You
mentioned the 12 rivers. I remember going back and forth with you on an email because I used the 12 rivers once, and 2 or 3 days later, I was like totally calm, and I remember emailing going, "I don't know what's in this stuff, Ryan. I see what the ingredients are, but you had this quote of what it does. It does do that. Oh my God!" You know,
yeah, that's a special formula.
Yes, and I think I remember like sharing that with Mystic. She's like, "Well, yeah, duh." I'm like, "Well, you know."
Can you talk to us more about that formula and what it is and what's in it?
It's a very Chinese medicine formula, so it's not something that has, you know, all of the kind of the flashy mushrooms that are popular. You know, if it does have a lot of those, but, you know, the cordyceps, the reishi, the miyake, and chaga, those types of things. And I have to pull up the.
And to be clear, it's in a powder form when you receive it.
Yeah, so that's only available in powder form. I will tell you that we're working on a tincture, very complicated.
Oh,
so
wow.
We're working on a 12 rivers tincture, which is super exciting.
I need the launch date of that one, Brian.
Us first.
No, it is still in R&D because the tricky part about extracting mushrooms, which a lot of people don't realize. So first of all, you have to use an extract for mushrooms because mushrooms are not digestible by the human body.
Right.
The cells, they're made of chitin. We can't digest them, and that's why wild mushrooms that aren't poisonous give a lot of people gastrointestinal distress because the body can't digest them, so then it kind of gives you diarrhea. The ones that we eat that are cultivated, that we eat from the grocery store, they've been kind of selectively bred. They were selected and selectively bred because they don't tend to give those GI issues. And again, it's not a matter of them being poisonous, or, you know, but they just can't be, you know, they just can't be digested. So it gives people GI issues. So, you know, when people are doing raw mushroom powders, you're not absorbing them. So you have to use an extract because in the extraction process, it doesn't matter if it's if it's a powdered extract or a tincture that's, and I'll explain it in a minute, that's extracted in using several methods, you're able to break down those cell walls. So I know from foraging, some of my favorite wild mushrooms, you have to just cook and cook and cook and cook them because you have to break everything down until it's kind of even hard to see what they were when they started.
Yeah, I try and tell people that because a lot of, I know a lot of people that do wild forage and, they'll get like, especially like shaga and reishi, right? They're like so hard. Mm-hmm. They're hard as, I'm like, y'all understand how you need to boil the crap out of this stuff, right? And they're like, no, that'll ruin it. I'm like, no, mushrooms are like the exception to like the low heat rule. Like to break that open for you to even be able to absorb it. Like, I mean, you need to have high heat for long periods of time.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And it's true for them all. Yeah. It's not just as incredibly woody ones, although those ones do take a lot longer to break down. So in terms of the tincture, well, usually tinctures are made, and this is true for the powdered extracts too, but usually tinctures are made with just extracting it with alcohol or some other solvent, but alcohol is the solvent that people tend to use with tinctures and the solvent that we use. And that works great for plants. With mushrooms, it doesn't work great because the alcohol is only extracting the polysaccharide, it's only extracting the triterpene, and you really need heat and water to extract the polysaccharides. And those are kind of the two main groups of the medicinal compounds that are present in mushrooms. So you can't just tincture a mushroom. You have to decoct it and tincture it in alcohol at the same exact time, and that's a little bit complicated. And so we don't have a launch date for it yet, but I don't know. Maybe by the end of the year.
I'm going to give you a marketing suggestion. Have a clock countdown, Ryan, of when it's going to happen so that I can monitor it. Oh, I don't know, maybe every 20 minutes. Not that I'm obsessive that way.
Yeah, it's going to be, I'll be sure to send you out when we do get the R&D batch. I'll be sure to send you out a sample because it's going to be good and it's going to be strong because, that's always been my philosophy with tinctures where it's like, I don't want to sell something that's not strong, right? Like,
true.
I'm going to make it as strong as possible so people can get the best value for their money and use less. So I'm excited to have this formula, which is a formula that I really believe in and that people love, available in this like super easy to use, like, very potent, very absorbable way. So yeah, I just totally sidelined from the original question, which was...
Oh, it's okay, because this is very enjoyable.
It's fine. We're going to go all over the place.
Yeah. And, people can look up the ingredients and look up, herbs and mushrooms on their own. But I do think talking about things about, like, extraction methods and, like you're saying, about people not wanting to cook the chaga or the reishi for a long time because they're worried about damaging it or damaging some of the compounds around it. And in the raw food movement and the wellness community, there is this bias. There's in that, things have to be raw, and if you process them at all, they're not as good. And there's people spending good money on buying, raw mushroom powders and, capsules made from raw mushrooms or, mushroom tinctures that are made without decoction, and it's a waste and it's really sad and, kind of similar to the mycelium fruiting body debate, which we can talk about.
Yes.
It's sad for me because I care about the medicine. That's my interest. The business comes secondary, and, to see people kind of not being misinformed and not getting what they're kind of paying for but more importantly, not getting what they need. I don't have a better word for it. It's sad on the part of the consumer. It's disappointing on the part of the industry.
Yeah, it makes me wonder too, like because I do see products, advertised like raw mushroom extract, raw mushroom powder. And to me, the first thing I question is the people putting it out. Like, are these just like random people that wanted to like jump on the raw food movement and don't know nothing about mushrooms? And then that means where are they sourcing their mushrooms from? Because if they don't know that like they need to be high heat processed, like, so now where are they getting them from? So then that even opens up, like, if you are getting mushrooms from a bad source, and then you're not cooking the crap out of them. Now that can actually be dangerous. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, it is once you're kind of in the know like you are, it's a little bit of a signal that maybe the person doesn't, they're kind of getting ahead of them.
Can you get into the mycelium debate a little bit, please?
Yeah, so I'm very biased towards using the fruiting body and not using the mycelium. I think of the mycelium as more of a waste product, and the fruiting body being kind of the house of all of the activity in terms of the medicinal compounds of the mushroom. There are some people who know a lot more than I do about mushrooms who are into mycelium, but it seems like the general consensus is that the fruiting body is the more medicinal part of the mushroom. So to kind of layman's terms, 99% of the time, the fungus, the mushroom, is existing as mycelium underground or somewhere else, but unseen. You can't see it unless you kind of go digging for it, and even then, you're probably not going to see it unless you're farming it, and it's in a really high concentration. And the mycelium is existing happily underground, doing its thing, growing, spreading. And when it runs out of nutrients, it sends up a fruiting body, and it's going to use that fruiting body to reproduce, like a seed, like a nut, like a fruit. And that's what the number one, the only kind of purpose of the fruiting body is. So at this point, the mycelium is dead or dying. It can't go on anymore. It's run out of all of its nutrients. It gathers everything that it has left and puts it in the fruiting body. And the fruiting body is going to pollinate with spores. And the fruiting body is this like highly concentrated source of all of what the mycelium has left. So the mycelium at this point, it just doesn't have anything left. So the decision to use the mycelium over the fruiting body, to me, it seems really straightforward. And it's not just the lifespan of the fungus that we can look at. You can also just analyze the mycelium versus the fruiting body, and you see that there's much higher levels of the compounds in the fruiting body. Also, the fruiting body is much, much more expensive, like magnitudes much more expensive than the mycelium, because the fruiting body is pretty rare compared to the mycelium. And the mycelium is also impossible to separate from the substrate. So if it's being farmed, it's impossible to separate from the substrate that it's being grown in. So if you're going to the grocery store and buying carrots, and you have to buy the 10 pounds of soil that the carrot is grown in, and then eat all the soil and all of the carrot and hope to get the beta carotene from the carrot, it's just kind of like that doesn't make any sense. We're not going to do that. So I don't want to buy it. I don't want to sell mycelium that's coming in the soil, the substrate that it was grown in. So this thing that, in my opinion, is already kind of lacking in nutrients in the medicinal compounds in mushrooms, and then it's also coming in the substrate, which it depends on the mushroom, right? Sometimes I don't know. It's confusing to me. I feel very passionately about using the fruiting bodies. Understanding the lifespan of the mycelium, the fruiting body, the mushrooms helps a lot in that. Just looking at the science helps a lot in that. And also just experiential, taking products that are made with fruiting bodies versus the mycelium, there is a big difference there for me. And I'm always really excited and really proud that, our products are only made from fruiting bodies, and we don't use any mycelium. And it costs us a lot, and we don't get the profit margins that people that are selling mycelium get. And I think that's totally fine, because like I was saying, I'm interested in the medicine here. I love plants. I love mushrooms. Plants are kind of like my number one thing. Whether it's medicinal, whether it's my garden, whether it's all my fruit trees, shrubs, flowers, I love plants. So fruiting bodies, number one. And I'm very interested. I can't find a good explanation for why you would use mycelium over fruiting bodies. I don't think I'm the most knowledgeable, smartest person in the world. I would love to be proven wrong, but as it stands, fruiting body over mycelium, in my opinion.
How about with like the spores? So like I believe it's in one of your reishi products. It has like the fruiting body plus the spore. So like, can you explain maybe why the spores are beneficial and why you'd also want to see that in a product?
I was mentioning a little bit about the extraction process of mushrooms, about using heat and water and also alcohol to be able to extract the polysaccharides and the triterpenes, which are the kind of the two main groups of medicinal compounds in mushrooms. So if you could take it one step further, the fruiting body is going to be higher in polysaccharides, and spores are going to be higher in triterpenes. So you hardly ever see, and at the time you never saw, a combination of the spores and the fruiting body extract, right? So people are just taking the spores, or they're just taking the fruiting body extract, and it's like, well, why don't you just take both, right? So that was where our Buddha blend came from, which is the raw reishi spores, which are cracked cell walls, so they are digestible. And these are certified organic. I've been to the reishi farm. Really incredible, really inspiring. It just made me want to quit everything I'm doing in my life and just farm reishi.
That would be me.
And so the raw reishi spores, the fruity body extract, it's all coming from the same place. The spores are coming from those fruiting bodies, all grown on Dwayne wood, and just combining them into two to give people like, the more holistic, the more full spectrum, like this is everything. Because while it's interesting to see like the isolated compounds and to know that, XYZ isolated compound is doing this, herbs are important because they're happening in harmony. And if we look at them through that kind of Western medicine, that Western cultural, that mechanistic kind of mindset, I think we're really missing the big picture here. We're really underselling and selling ourselves short for what they can bring to us. So, using the spores and the fruiting body together is, in my opinion, is just giving you that more kind of fundamental, holistic, full spectrum approach to reishi, which is, in my opinion, one of the most important mushrooms. And like you were talking about with the pine pollen in the forest, I think that reishi, from my experience, holds a lot of that kind of wisdom of the forest, that kind of ancestral knowledge in it, and to be able to give someone like a really concentrated source of that, I think is exciting and important. Yeah.
There was a product I was actually looking at because I wanted to order it for myself, but it was out of stock. I think it's back in now. Is the Lotus Pollen?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit more and what exactly it does? And I really just wanted to order because I'm like, wow, to have like lotus essence in my body seems like it'd be a game changer, and I might calm the fuck down a little bit. So it seemed very enlightening to have that flowing through my system.
Yeah, what it is and what it does.
Yeah, so, it's Lotus Pollen is, and this is going to be something that deviates a little bit from the science and kind of more towards the spiritual. I think that's fine.
Absolutely.
We're all in.
Absolutely.
The lotus is it's kind of a universal now kind of symbol of purification, of purity, of spiritual growth, and Chinese medicine we see that it's used for detoxification, it's used for mental clarity, these types of things. As a medicine, lotus and lotus root, lotus flower is important. Using the pollen is just exactly what you're saying, that it's like it's taking this essence, and it doesn't have a real recorded use in any kind of herbalism, traditional medicine system, the pollen, because it's not until very recently that you could gather it in the quantities that you need to use it. But in using it, again, it is the more spiritual side of it, is that it's containing that kind of that essence of the spiritual growth, of the transformation, right? Because that's kind of, as you know, that's kind of the metaphor of the lotus flower, how its roots are growing in the mud, and it comes up and it blossoms as kind of this beautiful flower on the surface of the water, and we're seeing that transformation from the mud to the flower. That's the spiritual growth. That's the spiritual path, right? It's to kind of take the darkness and transform it into light. And using the pollen, I'm just such a huge fan of pollens because they are that essence. They're like the essential oil of plants. They have everything in this highly concentrated form, and their very nature is kind of flowy and light, and it's made to kind of spread. And so I don't have a whole lot to say about it because it is more on the, as I say, the woo-woo, the spiritual side. I I love using it. I think it's really exciting. I think it's a great raw pollen. And then you're also just getting everything that you're always getting from using raw pollens, nutrition-wise, amino acid-wise. And so,
I used blue lotus flower before, and it was a very emotional experience every time I used it. I remember people talked about, oh yeah, it helps with relaxation or whatever. I'm like, well, lotus is such a spiritual plant. So I ordered it, and I took a very low amount of it. It was a powder, and every time I took it, I would cry about something. And it's stuck emotions in my body that were preventing me from moving forward would suddenly surface. Yeah. So then I was like, I can only use this shit when I'm it's on a weekend, I ain't working, because I can't be a hot mess.
Totally.
So then when I saw the pollen, it's I'm used to I like the pollens because that's a mystical part of the plant to me. It floats through the air. Totally. The bees carry it. It's very mystical in its essence versus I kind of look at it when you go down to the root of a plant, now you're in the earth. So you're super grounded, root chakra oriented. This is going to help ground you. And then you have stems and leaves, and then you have the flowers, beauty. And but it's mostly what you see with the physical eye. It's why you're drawn to something, how beautiful the flower is. But then the pollen is that essence that kind of carries you into the mystical realm of things. So I'm really excited to try that product.
I agree 100% with everything you just said. Yeah. Spiritual growth, I don't think it's supposed to be easy, right?
Oh, no.
It is dirty. Meditation. All the times that I've had an anxiety attack or cried during meditation, right? Mm-hmm. It's not supposed to be relaxing.
Exactly.
It's you're doing the work, and the work is hard, and that's why the work is important, right? That's why we get a result from the work. If we think about it not in a spiritual sense, but if we just go to the gym for an hour, we're not going to get anything out of it. Yeah, we went to the gym, right? But we don't get any benefit from it. We don't get any growth from it.
Right.
If you have a relationship, and if you have a romantic relationship and you never fight with the person because you're not engaging with the person, that's not a good relationship.
Exactly.
It just means, it's not a good relationship because you don't fight. It's you don't fight because you're not in love or you're not engaging with them. And I'm not saying that you have to fight in relationships to have a good relationship at all. I'm just saying that
if you're comfortable all the time, you're probably not growing.
That's what I was just going to try to say. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's so much information on your website, rawforestfoods.com, Ryan, but how can somebody educate themselves more? And there is a wealth of knowledge on your page for sure.
Yes, we've actually been trying to pare it down big time because...
Don't do that.
Yeah. Well, just move it, really. So, from the product pages to, I keep on saying, I love the plants. I've been putting these together. I want to put everything in it. It's really bad from a sales perspective.
Yeah.
People don't want that. They want to, just see the bare minimum. So, moving all of that kind of content that was in the product pages elsewhere and linking it so that it's still there, but it's not kind of bombarding and confusing people. And but in terms of doing research, I like books over the internet 100%. And I know that I have a website with information on it because it's hard to trust what you're seeing on the internet. And there's a lot of kind of pseudo experts, and there's a lot of people that are just trying to sell stuff. And yeah, people are also just trying to sell books. That's true. But I do think that the likelihood of finding kind of factual, reliable, real information through a book is a lot higher. In terms of using the internet, the only place that I really do research is using PubMed, which is the National Institutes of Health kind of collection of academic papers. There's a ton on like every single Chinese medicine herb. You can just go to PubMed and type that into Google and put in whatever herb you want to learn about and find research papers about it. So that kind of gives you the science. In terms of books, I'm like I was saying, I'm much more drawn to Chinese medicine. For people that are just getting into learning about herbs or Chinese herbs, I think The Way of Chinese Herbs by Michael Tierra. He also has The Way of Herbs, which is a Western herbalism book, is one of the best. He's been doing herbalism and Chinese medicine, I think, since the 70s or the late 60s. Super accessible book. It's not getting you, totally deep into the philosophy of Chinese medicine or the practice of Chinese medicine at all. It's just introducing you to the herbs and some of the concepts. And you can just flip through it if you want to learn about what Chinese ginseng. You can just go to a page and read a page and a half, and we'll talk a little bit about the kind of Chinese medicine information about it, and then also a little bit of the Western, and super accessible. And then in terms of going deeper, that's really where I kind of more tend to use the old Chinese text, or the recent translations of the older Chinese text, like the Chinese Herbal Medicine, Materia, Medica, which is just going to have everything in it, and it's constantly being updated and revised, and because it's the predominant book that exists for Chinese medicine, herbalism. So it's full of the kind of classical approach, the traditional approach, the kind of modern scientific approach, and they're not trying to sell you anything. They're not trying to kind of they're just trying to give practitioners the facts about the plants. And and that's kind of why I like using the text over kind of doing internet research, which is hard to kind of know what the quality and the motivation of the people behind the information that's being put out there. It's also difficult though, because then when people are like, how can I learn more about this? And it's like, well, here's this $150 book that's really esoteric that you can buy and read about. And it's a bad answer. I don't like to give that answer to people because it's not accessible to people. Actually, I pulled out some of my favorite Chinese medicine books here. So the Chinese Herbal Medicine, Materia, Medica, that's by East Wind Press, is the only one out there with that name. That's going to have kind of all of the Chinese herbs in it. The Chinese Herbal Medicine Formula and Strategies, also by East Wind Press. They're kind of brother and brother, sister books. And that one's going to have the formulas of the herbs that are in the Chinese Herbal Medicine, Materia, Medica. So you kind of need two books about it because formulas and strategies are so different than just the herbs. Chinese Natural Cures by Henry Liu, L-U, is an incredible book. It's a really, really fun book. It's not an old text. It's not an academic text. It's very much written for the layperson. It talks a little bit about the different stories behind herbs, and that's fun. It introduces herbs, it introduces formulas, it introduces some of the concepts that you were talking about earlier, the root causes of disease, whether that's heat, dampness, wind, cold, dryness, and I love learning the stories that surround the plants. So like a classic one is He Shou Wu, that people like to use for turning their hair dark again, and it translates to dark-haired Mr. Wu, and the story behind it is that Mr. Wu was in prison, and his hair was going gray, and the vine was growing in through the window, and he started eating the vine. That's all he really had to eat, and the hair turned black again. And that's the story behind Qisha Wu. So every herb has a origin story attached to it, and that's fun. So that book has this in it, and it also has the kind of like, the practical in it, and yeah, that's a fun book.
Let me just say about the books and information. Your team member Jasmine is amazing.
Yeah.
And
good.
Some months ago, she's my go-to girl. Some months ago, I saw a posting on your Instagram, and it was a traditional Chinese medicine, and it was a beautiful picture. I don't know, maybe it was a lotus flower. I emailed her.
I remember this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Jasmine, I need to know what that book is. And this is the response back I get. I asked Ryan, and he said it's one of his friends, and he posted, and I replied back with, I really don't care. I need to know what that book is.
I tried to find it out, and
we still don't know.
I still don't know. I think it was just like a prop book she had. At the time was the art director for Condé Nast. I think she just had a kind of a ton of stuff around that. Yeah, and she took that because it was a good this kind of attractive vintage.
Oh, okay. So she's a traditional Chinese medicine teas artist. Okay. All right. Okay.
Exactly.
Well, those books that you mentioned sound like a great place to get started because it really covers because Chinese medicine, again, is going to be different than Western, where it's like, if you have sleeplessness, you're not just going to take this one herb because it works with conditions of the body. Like if you have a damp spleen, it's causing this in your digestion, so you want to use an herb that's even prepared in a certain way that's not going to cause excess dampness in the body. So I'm probably going to get all those books you just mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah, and we didn't even talk about kind of the spiritual dimension in Chinese medicine at all.
Yeah, I would like to do, actually, if you're willing, like a separate show on that, if you're willing.
Yeah, me too.
Okay,
that's
awesome.
Actually my biggest interest in Chinese medicine
Mine
now.
too.
It's the 5 spirits, and it's also a little bit about the Qigong movements that work with those 5 spirits, and diet and nutrition, because that's all one. And I think that is where like the real power is, in understanding those spirits and the emotions that are attached to those spirits. Because there's 5 spirits in Chinese medicine. You were talking about the Shen earlier, which is this kind of the big universal spirit, and there's the big Shen, the big S, the capital letter Shen, which is the universal one, and there's the kind of little S Shen, and that's the Shen that's within us, and they should be tied together, but that tie can get severed. Reishi is actually kind of the go-to herb for reconnecting that, and when people have really shiny eyes, we say they have really good Shen, that the Shen is kind of radiating out of their face, but the mental, emotional that's tied to that spirit is communication, love, joy. So, and then there's organs, and there's foods, and there's elements, and there's seasons that are attached to it, which we won't get into. But it's interesting to think about, because there's no value assigned to the different emotions, the different spirits. It's just that they're there, and it's not that one is bad, and it's not that one is good. It's that we're looking for harmony within them.
When I was pregnant, there was a time period in my pregnancy where I was under a lot of stress. And I remember feeling so drawn to the reishi mushroom, and I took a lot of reishi, like a lot of capsules throughout the day, and I felt such a difference just by that. And it wasn't something, because, and I'm not saying that I'm some kind of like medical expert where I'm telling pregnant women what to go do, but I know my body when I'm pregnant, and I do know that reishi helps with like blood. So, obviously I'm growing another human, so I needed that. But it's like that did something to my Shen, where I was able to feel strength again to make it through that time period. And I felt more in alignment, I guess I could say, with like my spirit, my baby, and myself, like just and able to like make it through that without freaking out.
That's huge. I'm getting a little teary-eyed hearing it. It's so nice for you to share that, yeah. And it makes total sense through Chinese medicine, where, the blood doesn't have Shen in it until it gets to kind of a certain point in your heart. And that's, it's just kind of like the substance before that. And the blood houses the Shen. And if there's a disconnect there, then, well, like you're saying, you're not going to have it. And then we get this such a destructive cyclical relationship between stress and anxiety and our loneliness as like the human condition, and the loneliness is like the modern condition. And as we have stress and anxiety in our lives, we can't connect with ourselves, and that makes us not able to connect with others. And our stress and anxiety then also makes other people not to be able to connect with us, and that drives the stress and the anxiety. And yeah, maybe it's not a human condition. It seems like it is. Maybe it's just a modern condition. But it's that disconnect, right? It's that severing of the little S Shen from the big S Shen, from like who I am as a person to the other person, or to the universe, or the big spirit, or whatever, kind of tradition that you believe in and that you're drawn to. And the story you told to me just now, told to us, is very moving to me. Yeah.
So the Mystical Emergence podcast is all about healing the mind, body, spirit. What would you say if someone is on a limited budget, Ryan, that maybe the top 2 things that they could go and find on your website for overall health, or to improve their health in order of most importance to least importance? I know there's a multitude of products on there, but what would be your go-to if someone's saying, look, I need some help, I need some guidance? What would you give them as for a recommendation?
All right. Easy question, because I already have the answer. Top 3 would be raw pine pollen, the taproot deep shing, and the 12 rivers mycomedic. And that's because the raw pine pollen is just so foundational for men and women. I think it's just meeting our bodies at this level that we don't even have a vocabulary yet to talk about. Wow. And then the taproot deep shing is doing a few different things, but the really important thing that it's doing for people, and I think this is why people are actually get so much energy from it, even though it's not like a adaptogenic, or, kind of like an energy formula, is that it's targeting the clearing of heat in our bodies, and just that kind of the buildup of that toxic heat, which in Western medicine we'd call inflammation. In Chinese medicine, you just call it heat. And then the 12 rivers mycomedic, kind of for a few different reasons. One reason, again, because mushrooms are so nutritive. They bioaccumulate, they detoxify, we share more DNA with mushrooms than we do with plants. There's that force wisdom in mushrooms. And then also they're so supportive of the immune system, not in activating the immune system, but modulating the immune system. And, we kind of see this trifecta in terms of poor health, where people have bad nutrition, where people have lots of inflammation, and they have weakened immune systems. So we have something that's very nutritive in the raw pine pollen and also in the mycomedic. We have something dealing with inflammation, taproot, and then we also have the immune support with mycomedic. Top 2, I would say raw pine pollen, mycomedic. In top 1, raw pine pollen, after 10 years, is still my favorite. With everything I've learned and everything I've experimented with, and every herb I've taken, whether that's a really high quality American ginseng, or whether that's sheep placenta from nomadic tribes in Mongolia. I have this connection with pine pollen, and just from doing this for so long and seeing the effects that it has that are not explained, like I was saying, they're not explained with the amount of phytoandrogens that are present in pine pollen, that something else is happening. And I think that's exciting, and I think that's number 1.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I really, really hope that you will,
thank you.
Yeah, I hope that you will come back and actually talk about the spirit behind Chinese medicine, because That's what I talk about all the time, is like in trying to get people back in touch with the spiritual realm and understanding the spirit of what you're taking. And then, like, you know, that also goes into how you're ingesting it, being aware of the spirit that you're ingesting, and these being plant allies. It's a friend that is working for you in your body. Yeah. It's not just something you pop on your way to work and rush down the highway to get there, because there's a disconnect in that too.
Yeah, that would be exciting. We could talk about the 5 spirits. We could talk about the mental, emotional component of them, and then maybe like a food or an herb that kind of personifies them, the element, the season. And yeah,
I'm so excited.
It's kind of the mental, emotional part of the spirits. I find, I know we're wrapping up, but I just want to get my 2 cents in there.
Please do.
So I'm going to. And if you were to tie these to the Qigong movements, which has just kind of been impossible on a podcast, but you know, when you're talking about understanding the spirit of the plant, and then we're thinking about the mental, emotional that's tied to that, it's not just enough to say, oh, you know, this has the spirit of sorrow or grief, and I know that, right? That's easy. That's like what we were talking about being in a relationship and never fighting with a person because you don't care about them or the relationship. It's meaningless. Like, if you want to get in touch with that spirit, which is the Po, that is the mental, emotional sorrow and grief, you have to feel that. You have to go back to that place, back to that experience where, you know, you were toppled over with sorrow, you were toppled over with grief. And that's a hard thing to do. Mm-hmm. But that's where the work is. And, you know, in learning about the spirits and learning about that, you know, we can see, you know, when we're working through these, and maybe we're going to try to manifest joy, right? Like the time in our life that we just felt that kind of that pure joy that overtakes you, and it's like a state of flow, and it's like a spiritual experience, and it's all of these things, you know. And then we try to mine our memories for when was the last time we experienced that, and are we experiencing that enough? And like to feel joy as it like feels on your skin, like when the sunshine is kind of shining on you and warming up your skin, you know, to feel all of that. And then, unless we're willing to do that, unless we're willing to go to the quote unquote good and the quote unquote bad, and even within the good or within the bad, you know, to go even deeper in that. So, you know, it's not enough just to think about love and to feel love in you. You know, you have to think about what your relationship with that is and isn't, and, you know, if it's there and if it's lacking, and if there's some love in your life that needs restitution or revisiting, or So I think that would be really exciting. I would love that podcast.
The deep dive is coming.
Yes.
Now, which will come first, the deep dive and the conversation with Ryan, or that mushroom tincture? I need a deadline. I'm just saying.
Well, yeah.
I'm not. No, you don't have to say.
Hopefully, all at once.
Yeah.
My dream, what I've been kind of working on in all of the free time I don't have, is actually putting together something that just outlines kind of in a very, very kind of easy to understand way of the element, the season, the organ, the Qigong movement, the mental, emotional, the spirit, the food, the herb, the acupuncture point. You know, so it's everything. You have to do them all. You know, you can't just focus on one organ because you are looking for that harmony. But yeah, a way to get into that for people, because I think it's the most important information.
Well, good. Let us know when the live event seminar is going to happen with Ryan. We'll be there.
Yeah. In all my free time that I have to put it all together as one document, because I have about 1,000 different documents for all this in it that I've written. Yeah. Then I'll think about the seminar. Yeah.
Ryan of Raw Forest Foods, this has been amazing.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Absolutely my pleasure.
And so it is.
The Mystical Emergence Podcast.
The claims, information, or opinions heard on the Mystical Emergence podcast should never be used in place of your medical provider's advice or your doctor's direction. We have some of the best doctors on the planet, and you should always consult them with all health issues you might be experiencing. Thanks for listening.